Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome. Thursday, December the 7th, 2023 has almost knocked the mic over. Hope you're all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show, and we have got a jam-packed show for each and every single one of you here today. I see Chuck, John Edward, Ethan K, Jacob. Appreciate you guys jumping in the chat. Also, those in our Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel, to be sure your questions are answered there. Guys, for those of you now tuning in, appreciate you all. Welcome. Be sure, by the way, if you're on YouTube, you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live, when we drop new video content as well. Also, be sure to subscribe to our podcast at The Spurs Up Show, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We drop daily shows there, and you can check us out there daily. I want to say thank you also to those who tuned in to the A1 Air Quality Consultants postgame call-in show last night after South Carolina's loss to Clemson. That was our first ever postgame call-in show for a basketball game. Thought it was a massive success. And again, appreciate you all. You can go back and check that out on YouTube and podcast as well. Guys, again, we have got a jam-packed show for you. Lots to get into. There's schedules being leaked in the SEC, both Georgia and Ole Miss. Of course, guys, if you've heard me talk about it, December the 13th, that is the official SEC schedule release date. So we'll know all the teams, all 16 teams, right, with Oklahoma and Texas. We'll know exactly. We know who the conference opponents are, but when, where, all that good stuff. We'll get a better idea of the exact schedules, right? So that'll be December the 13th, but a couple schedules have been leaked. Of course, end of show, guys. We're taking your questions, your comments, your voicemails in our daily mailbag segment. JC Shurburtt also, who could not join us on Tuesday, guys. We rescheduled with him, getting JC on the airways today. A lot of good stuff in regards to NIL, in regards to transfer portal. Rocket Sanders taking a visit this weekend, the Arkansas or former Arkansas running back, which ironically enough, we'll talk to our next guest about that. So again, a lot of good intel on NIL, transfer portal, recruiting, right? The signing day just around the corner as well. Great conversation with JC Shurburtt. And also, guys, like I just mentioned, kicking us off. So you guys might recall over the summer, we did a full SEC team preview and opponent preview. We really just went and touched on every single SEC team, got a feel on what each team was bringing back and the prospects of this upcoming season, if you will. I figured, why not do that in an end-of-season review type of format? We're starting today with Arkansas. I think tomorrow we're going to go LSU, Monday Ole Miss, Tuesday Vandy. These are the conversations that I have scheduled. The plan is, though, is to touch base with a member from every single SEC team, get a year in review, and, of course, if they have a bowl game, talk about that upcoming game as well. So, again, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Really excited. That being said, let's go ahead and kick things off. Like I mentioned, we are talking today a program that I think we can all agree is very similar to South Carolina. The trajectories are eerily similar. We bring on one of the best in the business, our good friend John Nabors of Locked on Razorbacks, to talk all things Hogs football. John, what's going on, my man? It's been a while. Appreciate you taking the time, my friend. How you been?
Well, it's been good. It's funny because I thought back to when we talked over at SEC Media Days and thinking how high we are and were of our respective teams that we cover. And to say it was a disappointing season for both of us, at least we can have that and relate to that. So, yeah, quite a weird year for the Razorbacks, I'm sure, for the Gamecocks too.
Yeah, it's like I said, John, it's there are some eerie similarities. I feel like the trajectories of the programs, the head coaches, and I think the way the fan bases feel about them, and having to process and digest the on-field results while also loving their coach or what have you. So it's some very interesting similarities. Then you think about the connections with Logan Step, potentially a player coming over. We'll get to that more in a little bit, but let's talk about, John, specifically the 2023 season, because like you mentioned, I mean, even if you had conservative expectations on Arkansas, I don't think anybody saw this type of season coming. 4-8, 1-7 in SEC play. You do get that win at Florida, ironically enough. Dan Enos gets fired, I think, like 3/4 of the way or halfway through the season. Simply put, John, and I'm sure this is a in-depth or this answer has a lot of layers to it, but simply put, what went wrong for the Hogs this year?
Yeah, it was one that no one could have predicted because, in 2022, Arkansas went 7-6, and it was a pretty disappointing year because it had so many close losses. But what was weird about it is that Arkansas's offense was actually really good, and the defense was one of the worst in the country, if not the worst in the country statistically. And so people heading into the new year, it's like you replace Kendall Briles with Dan Enos. Arkansas was familiar with Dan Enos and the offenses he ran, and they also had a new defensive coordinator and Travis Williams coming in. So people were like, well, the offense is going to still be great, or at least solid, because you have KJ Jefferson, you got Rocket Sanders, you got some other pieces coming in, but the defense is going to be the concern. And nobody would have predicted that this year. It's literally a swap where the defense was actually pretty good, not great, not elite, but good enough. And the offense was one of the worst in the SEC. It was just so strange to see. And in the beginning part of it, it was really frustrating because Arkansas, once again, was losing a lot of one-possession games. They lost on the road to LSU in Death Valley at night by 3. They lost to Alabama, the team that's in the playoff, won the SEC on the road in their place by 3. They lost to Ole Miss, who was one of the best teams in the SEC, on the road at night in their place by a touchdown. So it was just really tough to try to get over that hump. But the real straw that broke the camel's back in this whole season was when they lost to Mississippi State, which, my brothers in Christ, I watched a game regular, like nothing, overtime, nothing, that ended 7-3 in modern college football. That is just awful. And I watched it in person at home. So that was really what broke it. It went just poorly from then on out when they fired Enos. They did get the win against Florida, but not trying to take anything away from it. But luckily, Florida's kicker missed that field goal at the end, or else Arkansas loses that one too and goes over. So just a piss poor season from all around, and one that Razorback fans want to forget pretty quickly.
John, what's so stunning about it when you look at the schedule, too? You mentioned all those road games in Arkansas. There were multiple times this year where you felt like, okay, the Hogs are showing some life. They're gonna go on a run or turn into something positive. What happened in Fayetteville? I mean, it really started like the tone was set with that BYU game. And just that one, it'd be tough, but it still felt inexcusable, I think, at the time. And then, we heard the chatter of Sam Pittman. We'll get into that in a second. But the reason that chatter starts, it's one thing to be losing when you're getting blown out on your home field, like a bad Auburn team is blowing you out. I mean, can you explain it? Like, because Arkansas's got a good home atmosphere, a good home environment, and just did not translate this year.
Yeah, it was weird. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that Arkansas's got one of the best atmospheres in the country, or even in the SEC, because let's be realistic about it. But the fans showed up for these games. Like, now the Missouri game by that point was kind of over with, but like, the Auburn game, even that Arkansas's season seemed to be all for naught. They had coming off that Florida win, so people are saying maybe there's some momentum there. Fans showed up. Weather was beautiful. The atmosphere was nice. But for whatever reason, they just played their worst games at home. And that it just shouldn't happen. Because all those games I mentioned that were one possession, close games, all those games were on the road, in hostile environments where they played well. And, the one game that they won was at Florida. They had never won at Florida since joining the SEC. So I couldn't explain it. It was almost like they, as a team and maybe as a coaching staff, built up to the diversity, us against the world. We're going into this hostile environment, and they could play that up really well to where the team could respond. But then at home, when they don't travel, they get to sleep in their own beds. They, just get to go in their home field and have all the team fans with them. It's like they didn't know how to translate that into getting them motivated and pumped up for the game in the same way. It was baffling because Arkansas's home schedule on paper was actually pretty easy, or at least as easy as it could be in the SEC West. But that's where they performed the worst this past season.
John, you mentioned the offensive side. Do you feel like it really just was Dan Enos' scheme handcuffing the Hogs? Was it the offensive line, which gave up 47 sacks? And believe me, I watched a lot of bad offensive line play this year, but 47 sacks is something serious. Because again, I just go back to our conversations at SEC Media Days, and we were literally talking about, I had KJ Jefferson ranked number 1 in regards to quarterbacks in the SEC. I think most folks thought Rocket Sanders was, if not number 1, maybe number 2. He played second fiddle to nobody. I mean, you thought to yourself, okay, the best quarterback running back duo, like you mentioned, you could have never imagined what the offense was going to be like. So do you look at it as was KJ not as good as folks thought he'd be? Was the offensive line just that bad? Was it Enos's scheme was abysmal? Was it a combination of all those things?
I mean, it's kind of the cop-out answer, but it truly was a combination. It was just a bad combination because basically what you had is that you had an Arkansas offensive line that lost a few key pieces from the previous year. And everybody just put in the hope is like, well, it's Sam Pittman. He's going to have a great offensive line no matter what. But then the recruiting just wasn't there as much. And Cody Kennedy, the offensive line coach who's no longer here, he's at Mississippi State. People just felt like there was not great evaluation on his part, wasn't great recruiting on his part. But they're like, okay, well, Sam Pittman will figure it out. Well, the offensive line was horrid. Like it was the worst offensive line I've seen in Arkansas history, at least since I've been alive. And that's saying something. So that was bad. And what was also on top of it is that Dan Enos, I think Dan Enos is a good offensive mind. I really do. Mm-hmm. But the type of offenses that he runs is more suited to drop back passing and longer developing plays, which can work if you have a great offensive line. When he was the offensive coordinator at Arkansas in 2015, the offensive line consisted of 4 guys who played in the NFL. Talking about Denver Kirkland, talking about Dan Skipper, talking about Frank Ragnow, talking about Sebastian Trottola. That's why that offense was effective, and because you had a great offensive line. But then on top of that, KJ Jefferson, who was in pretty much his entire life, had always ran an offense that was similar to what a Kendall Briles offense goes with, where it's not him having to do the reads and doing the whole thinking thing. It's where he snaps and looks over and they call the audibles and the plays. He was used to that. That's not what Enos does. He tries to give his quarterback a lot of freedom and teach him how to do the reads. So it just all of that accumulating into one just made it bad. And what made it get worse and look even worse is just when you're a team that had Rocket Sanders, KJ Jefferson, and these guys were so used to having high level success, and then they don't, their morale goes down. And then everybody's morale goes down, and they just stop believing and stop being confident. But you mentioned 47 sacks. Imagine if KJ Jefferson was not a big, able-bodied dual threat quarterback. Like imagine if you had some prototypical passer back there, how many more sacks there would have been. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was unexplainable, unfathomable, and just an overall disaster offensively.
Yeah, you bring that up. The sack numbers really go hard to believe. When my first thought of KJ Jefferson this season was him throwing a guy off of him against Alabama. And I mean, he's like a human pinball back there. And you think about, to your point, like if you have a Peyton Thorne back there or an AJ Swan or whatever, he would have had no chance. So of course, as the losses mounted, John, and I know you and I went back and forth on social media, and the pressures on Sam Pittman, the seats got warmer and warmer and warmer. And I've talked about this with Shane Beamer. I'm sure you'd say the same thing with Sam Pittman. Pittman is a guy, he's an Arkansas guy. He's beloved. He's got a freaking hog statue in his yard. But no coach, no matter how much goodwill you've built up, no matter what you inherited, the situation, no matter the culture you've built or your background, your history, no coach is immune to the effects of losing. And I think Sam Pittman absolutely felt that. I mean, anytime, John, you have to have your administration come out and let folks know, right, where you're going. That's typically the sign that, hey, this is the 1 year notice. If things don't turn around next year, y'all know what's coming. Did you think it was the right move for Arkansas to retain Sam Pittman? And I mean, were there times this year where you were ready to go ahead and, I mean, I'm sure immediately following Mississippi State, you're probably like, just burn the whole thing down. But I mean, like, were there moments for you where you were like, there needs to be a change now? I mean, that a topsy-turvy season in that regard for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look at it as I don't know the number as far as how many coaches had a similar type of seasons, but if you think about Sam Pittman, he had a 9-win year in 2021. Incredible, like one of the best seasons Arkansas had because they had the dark days of Bielema and then the Chad Morris, and in year 2 he got Arkansas to a 9-win season, winning the Outback Bowl. I mean, he was flying high. Everyone loved it. But then the next year you go to 7 wins, and then the next year you go to 4 wins. Like how many coaches are keeping their job in the SEC when you have that type of trajectory, especially when it's been all with the same quarterback like KJ, who's been so good. So I think it was after the Auburn game blowout at home where Arkansas didn't even show up. At that point, I was like, okay, this has got to end. This is over. Like the team is gone, like giving up. The offense isn't there. The defense even like
and Arkansas was favorites in that game. To your point, that was after the Florida game. They were favorites and lost by like 40.
Yeah, and it made it even worse when you think the next week Auburn gets smoked by New Mexico State or whatever at home. So it's like after that, I was like, this is over with. This is done. But then they come back and they beat an FIU team. Didn't really matter. And then they got smoked by Missouri. And I think at that point, I was like, this is over. It's done with and everything. And I thought that this was time to move on. And I didn't like the way that Sam Pittman was saying some things in the press conference. I just felt like it's over with. But then in the back of my mind, I'm like, Hunter Yurchek, the athletic director, coming out and being so strong for in support of Pittman, and Pittman not being arrogant about it, but just being like, he knows, he's like, I'm good. No, I'm not worried about my job. I'm like, what is it that they know? Like, what is going on? Like, why do they have such confidence and thinking it's all good? Like, these are like Hunter Yurchek's a dude who's like, he's a dude that will not tolerate losing. He has proven that. So I'm like, what is it that he's seeing? And then we saw in the next few days exactly what they had in their back pocket. And that was bringing Bobby Mother effing Petrino back home to Arkansas, which completely and totally changed the entire narrative and the entire feeling of Razorback football on a dime, where now people cannot wait for next season. That was the biggest kicker.
And, John, it really does come down to who you surround yourself with. And I want to get in that Petrino thing in just a second, because you mentioned, like, the end of the season, the vote of confidence, and then you make a move like that. In your mind, John, and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but confidence level 1 to 10. 1, he's gone. 10, he's, the future head coach. Your confidence level 1 to 10 that at this point next year, Sam Pittman's the head coach of Arkansas football.
I'd say probably a 7. Just because I feel like the moves that he made by bringing in a Petrino and the type of help that can be had from Petrino, I think it'll really help out. Because the one thing about Pittman, this is a thing with Jimbo and when he hired Petrino, I think everyone kind of had a feeling that probably wasn't going to work as effectively, because you're putting him in a situation where Jimbo had been the play caller the whole time and he was the offensive mind, but then he got ridiculed. He's basically forced to hire this guy, and it was already bad. And there was still going to be some tension there, some ego there and everything. Just didn't feel like it was going to work. But because that you have Pittman, who is the most, like, he doesn't care about getting credit. He truly doesn't. He doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about, I'm an offensive mind or I'm a defensive mind or whatever. It's like, he doesn't care. He hires a coach. And I think it's honestly been to his detriment with some hires, but he hires a coach and he just lets him coach. He doesn't intervene. He doesn't micromanage. He just lets him coach. And so I think because of those facts and because of what Arkansas will be able to do in bouncing back and kind of getting rid of some of the things that they needed to move on from, and getting a big returner like a Landon Jackson back, which was huge, and a Luke Haas, who was a SEC all-freshman tight end before he got hurt. I think that because of those facts, I think Arkansas, in their expectation next year, if they can just improve and get to that point to where they win 6, 7, 8 games. Not saying they for sure will, because we don't even know what the roster will look like, but I think that is perfectly capable and perfectly possible for that to happen. And the potential's there. So I think he'll still be the coach, but if it really, really, really goes bad, like it did this past year, he may not make it through the middle of the season.
Yeah, to your point, John, you mentioned when you're on a negative trajectory, downward trajectory, most coaches don't survive it. I would say virtually no coaches survive back-to-back missing bowl games. And so, obviously in Columbia, that's a big pressure point there. Certainly in Fayetteville also. You mentioned the roster. Listen, man, it's the world of NIL portal. You never know what's going to happen. One day it's one thing. The next day it's something else. What's the deal with KJ Jefferson, man? We were hearing rumors that maybe South Carolina was a favorite. Rocket Sanders is obviously visiting Columbia. And you mentioned Landon Jackson, obviously returning, the tight end as well. How is the portal affecting Arkansas? Do you think it's one of those things where you see it being a net positive? Are they completely retooling the roster? Are they taking the approach of, flipping a third of it and kind of just getting a brand new crop of guys in? Like, how is the portal taking its toll down there for the Hogs? And again, the status of KJ, and I guess Rocket's already entered the portal.
Yeah. So, honestly, and I'm kind of speaking for a lot of the Razorback fans too, but honestly, seeing Christopher Paul enter into the portal was huge, because he was a really good player, and whoever gets him is going to get a really great player. And there's some other guys too that, a lot of the linebackers did. I think it was like Manny Powell did. And you also had a couple D linemen. Torian Carter was one of them. And, you never want to see certain guys leave, but other than Paul, it really wasn't anything like, oh man, like we really wish we had him back. It's kind of like, well, he was fine. He was solid. He was okay, but you might be able to get somebody back in. But it got to the point to where with this Petrino hire and Arkansas on the offense, because the offense was so abysmal last year, even with KJ and even with Rocket, who had established success, I think people are just like, okay, Rocket, you want to move on? That's fine. We'll find somebody else, because everyone's putting their faith in Petrino. They're like, Petrino will figure it out. Like the offense was terrible last year. It's like, what's the worst that can happen? Him go 4-8? So I think that with Rocket moving on, like I love Rocket. I have no problems with Rocket or anything, but it's fine. It's fine him moving on. He dealt with a lot of injury this year. And with KJ, I have no, I don't have any sources saying this or any, knowledge of anything, but I think he's going to move on. I think he's going to enter the transfer portal. I really do. I just think that with Petrino being there, they're going to try to get a quarterback that Petrino wants. And the amount of talent that is in the transfer portal right now, I'm not saying Arkansas gets one of these, Dylan Gabriels or anything like that, but I think that there's just a lot of talent in there. And I think that they just want to start fresh with a whole new offense. They thank KJ. He broke all the records at Arkansas as a quarterback, but just this might be the time to move on. But my guess is that there's still some limbo because I believe, again, this is just my opinion. I believe that because Rocket Sanders and KJ Jefferson were taken care of very well in NIL by staying last year, because people forget that. Like there's a lot of schools that were probably coming after them after their 2022 campaign, and they stayed at Arkansas. And I'm sorry, they didn't stay at Arkansas for free. It's not like, oh, I'm getting these offers from these other SEC schools, but I'm going to stay at Arkansas because, I just love getting a scholarship. Like, no. They got taken care of. And I think that's at this point, because of the abysmal season this last year and the amount of money that maybe they got, I think maybe the whole situation is like, we could send you off and save some money and be able to get other higher quality players like on the offensive line that we need and other things too. So again, that's just my opinion. So I feel like that's why Rocket, one of the big reasons he's left is not necessarily that he was told he wants to leave, just maybe that, but also it wasn't really a hard fight for them to keep him. And KJ's in that limbo where it's like he can leave, but he ain't going to get the NIL that he got at Arkansas after this past season. Like somebody will pick him up, somebody will be interested, but I don't think he's going to have the suitors like he maybe did a year ago where his value's gone down a little bit. And I think he's kind of holding on to hopefully that Arkansas can do it and meet with Petrino and see how that goes. But I think at the end of the day, KJ, just my gut feeling, enters into the portal and Arkansas moves on from him.
And John, we could have a full-on, we could talk about this for hours, a discussion about, and because I've mentioned this, NIL, and like you have to kind of treat it like a salary cap in pro sports. So to your point, it's like, okay, are these two pieces worth it? We could free up this cash. And again, that makes some people cringe. But I think it's where we are in college football. You have to look at your roster that way. To the recruiting side of things, high school wise, national signing, that's sort of a footnote now because of the portal and that rules everything. Where is Arkansas in regards to the December 20th signing day? I was just taking a look. They've got 18 commitments, 8 4-stars, 10 3-stars. They're 24th overall, and they are 13th in the SEC. Isn't that wild? You can be a top 25 nationally recruiting. You feel good about yourself, and you're like, oh, yeah, we're 13th in the conference out of 16 teams, by the way, with Texas and OU. So how do you feel about Arkansas's recruiting efforts, and will that be able to positively affect, obviously, the 24 season? And, do you feel like there's some difference makers in that Arkansas needs?
Well, I think that there's potential there. Like there's some guys that are in that class that, could be really good for Arkansas and everything. But, and I don't mean this as a cop-out answer, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think anybody cares about the recruiting class. And the reason I say that is because everyone knows Sam Pittman has 1 year. This is it.
Yeah.
So we don't care about what you do in the recruiting class and developing guys as true freshmen. We care about what you're getting in the portal. And I think even Sam Pittman and his staff understands that, because it's like, getting some freshmen in there, yes, it's important. Yes, it's important for development. But for crying out loud, how many of these freshmen that we just see all across college football will even remain in your program for very long? And, are you going to trust and need a true freshman to come in and save your bacon, for, pardon the pun, but for your job and everything? Then if that's what you're doing, then you're done for as it is. So I think that there are potential guys there, and there may be some players that eventually could be great for Arkansas and everything, but they are focusing so hardcore on the portal because they need help right now. They need immediate help right now. Offensive line desperately needs help. They're going in to get quarterbacks. They're doing that, and so I think that as recruiting class again might be important. Nobody cares. It's not moving the needle. If Arkansas finishes 13th in the SEC, they're like, we don't give a rip. What did we do in the portal? That's what matters.
It's win and win now, John. Indeed. That's why the portal is such a point of emphasis. Is there a quarterback out there for you? I know obviously the price point matters when it comes to these starting quarterbacks. Who's a guy out there maybe you've heard, or if you just had your pick of the litter, who would you be going after in regards to a starting signal caller for next year?
Man, there's so many quarterbacks out there. And, of course, his name just escaped me, and I was just talking about him yesterday, but he's a guy from North Texas. He's a transfer out of North Texas. Apparently, Arkansas has shown some interest in him. Petrino really likes him. The only thing about it that I think was interesting is Petrino's never really had a small quarterback. He's like 5'11", which it can work. Like, it's happened before in football. But I was just looking at all the guys that are in there, and I'm like, surely one of these guys can see Petrino and say, hey, this was a guy that, Coach Lamar Jackson, and got him a Heisman Trophy. He coached Ryan Mallett, rest in peace. He coached guys that were really successful in college. And I think some quarterback would see that and see his resume and see what he does with quarterbacks and say, you know what, that's a place that I may want to go and try out. So they're going to have their pick on it. I really do believe that they'll have a few options there. And whoever they end up getting, again, it just goes back and I trust Petrino. Petrino is the guy that has never had bad quarterback play. I mean, he really hasn't for the most part. So whoever he gets, everyone's going to be like, all right, great. This guy's going to be great. We don't even know anything about him. Don't care where he's from. Don't care what his size is. He's going to be great because Petrino believes in him. So therefore we believe in him. But I like the North Texas guy. I mean, obviously, if you got a Dylan Gabriel or something like that, that'd be great. Or Kyle McLeod. But I feel like those guys are probably going to some other places of bigger stature. But yeah, I like what the guys that they're at least looking at and the type of quarterback that they're looking at because, again, there's just so much talent there and so many options there.
John, year 5 of Sam Pittman upcoming next year. And again, we're looking way too far ahead. We don't even know the schedule in regards to exactly how it's going to shake out. But you were talking about it a little bit earlier in regards to Sam Pittman, the future of Razorback football, minimum expectations. I mean, obviously making a bowl game, but I look at Arkansas as a program that I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like Razorback fans have realistic expectations from the standpoint of, like, Arkansas as a team. Are they going to win the SEC? I don't know, but you don't have to do that. You can win double-digit games. You can do what Ole Miss would have done this year had the playoff been 12 teams, or what Mizzou, sorry to bring up the sore subject of the Missouri Tigers, but the season they had. Like, if you go 10-2, you're going to have a really good shot at getting that 12-team playoff. South Carolina's in the same boat. I think Kentucky's in the same boat. Again, I mentioned Ole Miss, Mizzou. So you want to be getting closer to that and trending upward. Is 6 wins enough to bring him back for year 6? Does it have to be 7? Does it have to be 8? In your mind, what are the minimum expectations for next year?
It's funny you mentioned Missouri. We're all friends. Me and Missouri people.
I did see you had to go back on Mike's show and eat a little bit of crow, which, I feel like everybody was trashing Mizzou with him. I had him 6-6. I mean, to be fair.
Well, see, and that's what made me laugh. And I'll answer your other question, but it was like, it made me laugh. And I'm like, you guys use me as an example. And it was so funny because I'm like, I didn't say anything that was outlandish. I'm like, Missouri got picked to finish 6th in the East. So it wasn't like I was like saying that like they were picked to finish first. And I'm like, oh, they're going to be trash. It's like everybody said it, but I appreciate them making me a little bit more popular and getting a lot of attention to me because I really don't care what Missouri fans think. But either way, as far as the expectation goes, for next season, I believe it's got to be at least 7 wins. Regular season, that is. At least 7 wins. And the reason I say that is because the expectation, like, everybody's going to give you a different answer. But I think the majority of fans are completely and totally fine with, here in Arkansas at least, averaging anywhere between 6 to 8 wins a year. Getting to a bowl game every single year. There should never be a time where you don't make a bowl game. 6 to 8 wins a year. And then every 3 to 4 to 5 years, you get to that 9 to 10 win range. Just so you have that 1 year where it gets put together. You do that, you'll be great. Like, we're not even having a conversation about Sam Pittman if he went 7-5 this year. Like, we're not having the conversation. We're not talking about him getting fired or the craziness that went on. But he went 4-8. So I think next year, just to kind of show a little bit of good faith, get to that 7-win range and people will be happy. They'll be excited. They'll be excited about the potential. And also it's about how you do 7-5, right? If you go 7-5 and you get a big win somewhere in there, you beat a team you're not supposed to, like they get Texas at home next year. Like if they win that game, or LSU at home next year, or Tennessee at home, you get some sort of big marquee win, including into that 7-5, then it's going to make it even greater. So just if you get to 7 wins, everybody will be fine, and get to a decent bowl game. Anything above that is just absolute bonuses. 6 wins, again, depends on how you do it. I think he could not, but anything less than that, then he's gone.
John Nabors, Locked on Razorbacks. John, one last thing before I get you out of here. We are, believe it or not, in the midst of college basketball season. Most folks are still locked in on football, the portal, bowl season, all that good stuff. But Give us an idea of your expectations for the Hogs this year. Obviously, Bud Walton was rocking, I think, a week and a half or so ago when the Razorbacks took down Duke. And certainly it looks like Arkansas, one of the top teams in the SEC. Your thoughts, expectations, and what you're most looking forward to with Razorback basketball.
Well, I mean, the expectation has been set. I mean, Arkansas's made 3 straight Sweet 16s and made 2 Elite Eights in that time. Eric Musselman, since the coach at Arkansas, he's 8-3 in the NCAA tournament. The next coach after him in the SEC only has 4 wins in that same span. So the expectation is you get to the tournament and you make some noise. And this year it is a high expectation because you had a lot of great transfers coming in, and you got some dudes, you got some offensive pieces, and there's been some bumps in the road, but that's how it goes with Muss's team every year. And that's why Razorback fans, when they lost to UNC Greensboro at home, people were upset, but they're like, they'll figure it out because it's Muss. It's this team. They'll figure it out. That's how the approach is. And it's going to be interesting because this weekend they play Oklahoma in Tulsa, which people may not know. Oklahoma's undefeated in the number 19 team in the country. Really good team. So it'll be another test. But the problem is that Trevin Brazil, who's such a phenomenal player and who they lost last season, if they didn't lose him last year, could have been a different year in the SEC. But he suffered a pretty severe ankle sprain this past weekend's Monday's game against Furman. And we don't know the exact extent of it, but Muss is saying it could be significant for as far as a few weeks. Doesn't look like it's season ending, at least not at this point, but could be significant. So that's a huge bummer because we know how great of a player he is. And he was the player of the week because of his performance against Duke. So basically the expectation is, and this may trigger some Auburn and Alabama basketball fans who just became fans a few years ago of basketball. But here's the thing. No one gives a rip in Arkansas about winning an SEC regular season or an SEC tournament. No one cares because it's what you do in March Madness. It's what you do in the tournament. That's what matters. Does anybody care here in Arkansas that Arkansas finished 10th in the SEC last season and lost a bunch of terrible games and looked like crap? No. You know why? Because they went to the Sweet 16 by beating the number 1 seed Kansas. That erased everything. So it's about what they do in the NCAA tournament. They have all the tools, especially if they're healthy, to make a run and be a Final Four team. Like, they are that good. But can they stay healthy? Can they put it together? Can they do what they needed to do and continue to develop and grow as a team? I think they will. So I said this before and I'll say it again. I believe this is Muss's most talented team, his deepest team that he's had since he's been at Arkansas. And it all hinges on health. But this is a team that if they get – it's a crapshoot in the NCAA tournament as it is, but if they get bounced out before the Sweet 16, it'll be a major disappointment for Arkansas.
John Nabors, Locked On Razorbacks. John, you always bring the heat, my friend. I appreciate you doing this. Let the folks know where they can check out your work. Obviously, you're popping on social media. You're all over YouTube. I see you all the time, but let folks know where they can check out all of your great work.
Yeah, so I do the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. You can find it wherever podcasts are found. It's all Razorbacks all the time, so I'm sure a lot of your audience would be totally interested in that. But it's great to also be on social media. You can follow me on all forums at Buzz John Nabors. Nabors is spelled Nabors because reasons. I don't know why. But you can follow me on there. And, I'm one of the guys who I'm a Razorback fan. I grew up in Arkansas. I went to Arkansas. I grew up a fan, and I'm still a Razorback fan. So if you're looking for unbiased media, I ain't your thing. So, but yeah, you can check it out that way. And appreciate anybody subscribing or following or anything like that. I try to have fun a lot of times. So it should be good.
John, you're the man. Let's do it again soon, my friend. Keep up the good work.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. Appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, man. We'll talk soon. Great stuff, guys. Good friend of mine, John Nabors, Locked On Razorbacks, talking all things Arkansas. Like I mentioned, guys, that kicks off our SEC season in review. We're going to do that for every single SEC team. Tomorrow, like I mentioned, we already got a couple locked in. Tomorrow, we'll do LSU. Monday, we'll do Ole Miss. Tuesday, Vandy, so on and so forth. And also, if those teams have bowl games, we will talk about those games, preview those games, break down those games. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. But on the other side, we've got a great conversation lined up with our good friend J.C. Shurburtt of the Big Spur. We talk a lot about NIL, transfer portal, who may be coming back, who may be leaving, all that and more on the other side of this break. Guys, you're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose, while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Marshall Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, December the 7th, 2023. I want to once again say thank you so much to our good friend, John Nabors of Locked on Razorbacks, for taking the time to chat. really good stuff in regard to the state of Arkansas football. And always enjoy having him on our airwave. Guys, definitely check out his work. Locked on Razorbacks does a great job, especially on the YouTube front, but podcasts as well, social media, all that good stuff, guys. With that being said, like I mentioned, normally he joins us every single Tuesday. Had to move some things around this week. He has been a busy man, as I'm sure you can imagine. JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur of Carolina Rise as well, one of South Carolina's lead collectives. And I had him on today, guys, to talk all things transfer portal, NIL as well, though, and answer some questions in regards to what's been going on with Juice Wells and Mario Anderson and is the sky falling and what have you. So, guys, a really informative conversation, really entertaining conversation, as it always is, our good friend. Enjoy this conversation with JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur. Talk all things Gamecocks football Thursday this week, normally Tuesdays, but either way, our good friend JC Shurburtt, the Big Spur, inside the Gamecocks, his show as well. And of course, he's been running around like crazy with the transfer portal, NIL, the madness that has ensued. And again, we appreciate him taking his time here to chat with us. JC, what's going on, my friend? Appreciate you and happy to be talking with you today.
Absolutely. Sorry about Tuesday to the audience out there, but good to be here today talking with all of your audience and yourself. And it certainly is a very busy time. It's crazy, I thought it couldn't get any crazier than last year, but lo and behold, this is a new year. It's a lot more crazy.
Yeah, and JC, I wanted to start there, and I'm not necessarily asking you to pull back all the layers, if you will, but I mean, detail your day-to-day, your life right now since the transfer portal opened. And even before that, because before that, we were getting reports of this guy's entering the portal, the Juice Wells stuff happened. We're seeing the Garnet Trust execute on deals. I mean, it's got to be – you and I have talked off air about how different it is now versus, say, 10 years ago before all this happened. And December was kind of a downtime, and you were looking forward to February 4th or whatever the signing day was. And now with the December signing day, with the portal, with NIL, I mean, you got to be running around like crazy right now.
Yeah, I get up, pretty early in the morning. I like for about 4 my time, so about 5 y'all's time. If I'm there, it's 5 that time. I'll have some reflection time for about 10 minutes, and then I get to work. Because there's other things I have to do where my phone does not need to ring. And I don't get calls that early in the morning. Well, then about once everybody wakes up, my phone pretty much goes nonstop. Through the evening. There's message board responsibilities, obviously, on Big Spur. There's NIL stuff with Carolina Rise, obviously, that I'm in the thick of. Because we all work together. Garnet Trust kind of has signed, but we all kind of work together on the same team, really, as far as that goes. It's not a competitive situation, as I've said. But so I'm in the thick of that. And then, we got the show every day. I got JC and Morgan, lucky for us this week, JC and Morgan, we decided to go live during the playoff selection on Sunday because Mike travels around and calls games and stuff. It's basketball season for him. So he gets to go on the road and, cover a sport that not everybody's quite into just yet. So that's good. But, so there's a lot going on. Plus I'm getting married December 30th and, it's the second one, so it's not like her and her parents are planning it. It's kind of up to us. It's a sort of a destination wedding down in West Palm. So today I'm on the phone with caterers and the Cuban restaurant, Don Ramon's Restaurante Cubano, which is where we're having I guess it's more of a welcome dinner than a rehearsal dinner, but had to pay that deposit. So, man, Christmas is coming, and it's a busy time to be JC Shurburtt right now.
That's why they pay JC Shurburtt the big bucks, my friend. You deserve it.
I hope so.
JC, on that note, again, things are changing. The landscape is changing on a daily basis, right? You think something is one thing, and then it's another thing. The latest news is that running back Mario Anderson intends to enter the portal. I say intends because I don't think technically his name is in the transfer portal. It's an interesting thing, right? We're getting reports where it's like, this guy's going to the portal, then 48 hours later, they're like, hey, this guy still hasn't entered the paperwork. Like, that's what I'm saying. It's so fluid and can change. But where do we stand right now with the Mario Anderson situation. I know there was some speculation that maybe it's bad advice or it was something where he pulled the rug out from under, changed his mind last minute. We also know Rocket Sanders is going to be on campus this weekend visiting. What's the latest with the Anderson stuff? And I mean, where Carolina sits right now, odds he may come back, just the overall outlook of that.
Yeah, and every situation's different, and people will look at it and go, "Well, my gosh." And look, I want to talk about because the other 14 guys that announced they're going in the portal or whatever. I know maybe some people ask about a Mega Blake or whatever, but really the focus or the guys that sting are Mitch Jeter. And I'll tell you right now, that had nothing to do with NIL. Weird enough, right? He's convinced that if he can go someplace a little quote unquote higher profile, that he can more easily get to the NFL, and he's graduated. So, and that's the thing too. Some guys like Keir Thomas, remember when he was here and he hit the transfer portal, went to Florida State. I mean, Keir had been there 5 years, and he just wanted, because he grew up a Florida State fan, for his last year to be something different. Tonka Hemingway looked into doing that and decided ultimately it was best for him to stay at Carolina. So that's what you're kind of battling against too. Some guys are just like, "I've been here long enough, got my degree. Maybe I want to," it's the same concept as people taking a sabbatical year after they graduate and going and hiking around Switzerland or whatever. I would compare it to that. Football, a little different, but they just want to maybe go do something different. So that's fine too. So Mitch sort of that stung, but it was not at all NIL. In fact, I think whatever South Carolina was going to give him, it was really competitive for a kicker. I mean, very competitive. I'll use that term, competitive, highly competitive. So there's that. Juice was a money situation, but man, without giving away any kind of secrets, it wasn't like we were talking about a ton. And some of the numbers out there about what Juice is actually getting last year are way high and wrong. Receivers with his ability probably don't fetch much more than, a lower number than many of you would think. I saw somebody talking about, he's going to get SEC quarterback money. I'd be surprised. Just I'll put it that way. I mean, I'd be shocked, actually. And it's not that he's not a special player. I mean, you're not going to get much better than Juice when he's healthy and ready to go. But so that's kind of a money situation. Now Mario also is, but it's different type. In terms of what I would call maybe financial needs, like that was why Anderson was kind of talking about going to the NFL. And I thought, yeah, that's probably bad advice because I don't know quite that he's done enough to even warrant like getting in the right situation undrafted free agency wise, which running backs can get on a roster. I mean, Rico Dowdle's an example of this, man. I mean, Rico's what number? He's all the way up to number 2 now, and probably could be the starter one day for the Cowboys. And that's just the nature of that position. I always tell running backs, or my opinion is, I don't ever give anybody advice, but my opinion is with running backs, if you have a chance to go, because the NFL chews you up and spits you out, and they're looking for fresh legs, and you may be sitting on a roster where somebody's in a contract year, and they're like, well, he's wearing out a little bit. Let's jettison him, and we can start, Mario for a little while, till we get somebody else, and that's just kind of how it goes. But his situation, he's financial need wise, without getting too much into it, and it's a different type of, I guess, financial need. And so you understand it, but it was interesting, Chris, to me that he signed with I knew his old agent. I don't know the new agency, but his old agent was a really good guy, and got him some deals and stuff. But it's kind of funny. He signs with a new agent, and then all of a sudden hits the portal. So somebody somewhere thinks they can get him something. I will say that, South Carolina, as far as on that end goes, they haven't given up on him coming back. It didn't really have a lot to do with Rocket Sanders. I think Gamecocks are going to shoot their shot with Rocket and see what happens. And it's a good sign Rocket's visiting this weekend. But there's other running backs out there too. It's not like Carolina was going to just, no matter who was coming back, stand still and do nothing with that room. You have to. They struggled this year a lot just because of depth, and you get banged up at that spot. You struggle with injuries. So, you really need to be 5 deep and 5 good ones. I think in this league, just as insurance against injuries and things of that nature. So, yeah, sure, they probably welcome him back, but everything, a lot of things revolve around money right now. So that's the deal there. But yeah, those are the 3. The rest, it's unfortunate, Chris, because you sort of look and 14 is a big number, and you're like, well, what were they doing recruiting wise? I don't know that this won't be more common as we move forward, though, with the ability to sign as many guys as you want and just having kind of honest conversations with people about where they fit in terms of playing time. I think all the rest of them really are directly related to playing time, role on the team, where you see yourself, all that, which is pretty standard. That's kind of how I guys used to transfer. And now that you don't have to sit out a year, it's easier to make that decision, and go, okay, I can play here next year or there. But those 3 are the ones, and heck, I guess Carolina lost 4 good ones last year, or 4 starters last year. So if basically it would be 2 because Juice didn't really start this past season. And I think you take that when you look at other teams. I mean, Clemson, I think, lost 2 starting safeties, 1 starting safety and a key backup. Got in the portal, including Mabuku, who Clemson kind of found him and developed him, and now he's rolling out. So wants to be closer to home. So every school goes through this, and I think South Carolina, if provided there are no more surprises, which you can't rule out in this situation, I think Gamecocks are actually in much better shape than they could have been.
JC, you talk a lot about how NIL education is really important. And I want you to speak directly to the audience this next question I'm about to ask you, because, we've seen NIL create great opportunities. And I think it's great to compensate guys that, again, have worked their butts off to create value around their name, right, by their hard work, their play on the field, their value as a player, an asset to a program, whatever. But as well as I do, NIL is a lot like everything in life, to where, it takes a lot, for example, to build up trust, but it only takes one action to break trust, and then it's really hard to get that back. So for every good thing that has happened in NIL, and this is far beyond South Carolina, but we're obviously going to use South Carolina here. For every good thing that has happened, a Mario Anderson thing happens where fans look at it like, man, you took a dude from D2. You gave him an opportunity at the SEC level. He thrived. And now he's jumping ship. Then you got Juice Wells, which I don't really even have to go in that one, but like last night, he's in the facility getting his hair cut, talking about Carolina people are crazy. So, and I know you've seen a lot of the chatter on social media about NIL, people with their thoughts, their opinions, they're upset, right? And it makes sense. But what do you want to say to the folks about, because NIL is something we have to embrace. I mean, everybody does, right? I'm sure, again, Clemson people probably feel the same way. There's Texas A&M, they're dropping like flies. I mean, it's happening everywhere. And each respective collective, people have got to circle the wagons in their own respective way. But I mean, what would you say to the fans listening, Gamecock Nation as a whole? Because again, it's all the good things that have happened in NIL. It hurts to think about that, like a Juice Wells could set this thing back. That's unfortunate that one guy could do that, but when it's a player of that nature and then he's acting the way he is, I mean, it's tough for a lot of people to stomach. So I'll let you speak to that.
Well, and then the fact he didn't play this past year, and people, Gamecock fans,
it's pretty well known that he could have. Let's just call it for what it is.
I mean, especially toward the end, there's no question. But I'll say this, a lot of fans making comments on social media, I'd venture to say that their investment in NIL pales in comparison to the people that, actually put the money in for Juice to return last year and think about how they feel. I'd venture to say many of them, judging from the comments, because one breath they'll say he stole money from us, and then I don't support NIL. Well, then he didn't steal from you, brother. Sister. You didn't help. I mean, what are you complaining about? And I know that's the concept of it. I think what fans need to realize is, and we do live in this world where it's kind of a say anything world. all of a sudden everybody has a voice. And I think there's a lot of positive things about that, Chris. It allows, folks like you and me to not have to go work for one of the worst businesses in the history of businesses, which is local radio, to get our voice out now, right? We don't have to worry about those guys. And that's beautiful, man. I love that. But, on the other hand, there's a lot of noise in the system that used to not be there. I would encourage Carolina fans, and it's hard. It's kind of the same concept as when you lose a recruit. Don't show your ass. Just don't. Juice Wells deserved complete silence and not a reaction about it at all. No reaction. Just move forward. Yeah, it hurts. Yeah, it stings. It is very new. And new things, sometimes we react 10 times more emotionally than maybe just the standard old, oh, we lost a 5-star at the end in recruiting or whatever. But what that does is it doesn't change Juice's mind. It doesn't make him feel guilty. He's made his decision, I guess. Well, that haircut thing was kind of weird, but I guess that's one. And then two, you're going to hurt yourself with other players because they see that. And these kids talk. And I'm sure there's venom from other fan bases towards players too. But right now, it's so critical at South Carolina to kind of get some alignment and everybody row in the same direction, that when you just kind of fall off a cliff like that collectively, and it's not everybody in the fan base, it's probably a small percentage, but the perception, which a lot of times that becomes reality in the sport, is that everybody just turned on the guy, blah, blah, blah. And so you create a victim out of somebody who's definitely not a victim. That's number one. Number two, as far as collectives and NIL goes, and I kind of brushed back on Avery Wilkes from the state the other day when he went off and started, I would never give money. You're a sucker if you give money to NIL. Okay, so here's the reality, right? And I don't tell people how to spend their money. And I know that it's unfair to ask fans to fund these things. I don't think when you look at the price point for NIL that it's ridiculous. I mean, you're talking average member on Rise and Garnet Trust both is probably $30 a month, and that's pulled up by some people that can afford to give, a couple of $100, $1,000, or whatever. Most of the time, it's around $15 to $20. So the price of a meal these days. And so, I don't think that's egregious. I think the theory, I agree with everybody. It's unfortunate that it's come to this, but here's the choice. You can either embrace it and not work against it. I'm not saying give your money, because I don't tell anybody how to do their money, but people out there actively working against it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Don't work against us. Don't sit there and, because you don't believe in it or want to do it, don't sit there and tell everybody else not to. That just causes somebody maybe on the fence to go, yeah, he's right. Because number one, you're not changing it. All you're doing is hurting South Carolina. You're not changing the NCAA's mind. You're not changing the SEC's mind. You're not changing anybody at Carolina's mind, because Carolina's got to compete. You're hurting South Carolina directly if you do that. No matter what the opinion is and the thought process is. So don't do that, because it's a fact of life. I mean, you can't, hey, yeah, let's all get rid of the collectives. You think Georgia's going to do that? You think Clemson's going to do that? You think North Carolina's? You think Tennessee, who had the first collective? Those guys were flying around in private jets. Jesus, but it's don't do that. South Carolina's still way behind, and it's getting better because the more people know about it that they can directly help, the bigger it gets, and it's a better situation this offseason than it was. But just because you're upset that Juice left. Juice is one guy, and the vast majority of everybody else they don't operate that way. That's A. And B, when you do things like, want to tear down the collectives or whatever, or say things like the collectives are the problems. Not here, brother. If it weren't for Garnet Trust and Carolina Rise, it'd be very bad. So I would just encourage people to use some common sense here and understand that you're not helping. And if you want to know more about it, like how it works, please drop me an email. I can explain this stuff to people. I mean, it took me a while to learn about it, but I'll be glad to explain it to you, lay it out, and kind of show you what the deal is. It's not as I think sometimes people see these dollar figures and they feel helpless. Oh God, they're getting 4 million. There's a rumor today. Carson Beck wants 4 million to return to Georgia. I'm like, well, good luck. If I'm Kirby and those guys, I'm like, oh, well, you have a nice. We'll see you. Gunner Stockton, come on now, dude. Because I mean, look, that's ridiculous. But that's not true. That's probably not true. So I would just encourage everybody to keep an open mind about it. First and foremost, if you're against it, don't work against it, and please don't bash players that leave, because that player doesn't care. It just kind of reinforces his decision. And then, somebody else may see that's interested in South Carolina and go, well, my gosh, these people, I can't do, I'm not, they want me to be their hostage or something if I go there. I mean, it does work that way, especially, you got to understand kids too. Like, we know social media is social media. It's not real life. So does Shane Beamer, apparently. But to some of these kids, it is. So you don't want to do that, like, psychologically. So that's for the fan base out there. That's just what I would encourage. I'm not asking anybody to give money. I said, do it with your money what you want. I think it's a great investment because you help the Gamecocks win. And I think for the first time ever, fans have a direct impact. You don't have to give them money to hire a coach or build a building or upgrade the stadium and then pray. You can directly impact a roster, which is huge. Everybody wanted Mark Kingston gone last year. Carolina Rise provided him with some resources to get some players back. Boom, super regional. We did twice as much this year, and they could probably get to Omaha. It works, regardless of who the coach is, right? It's not about a coach or being mad or I'm not going to do that until there's changes. That coaching and all that's different. That's Gamecock Club. That's seats and season tickets and all that. This is a totally separate thing that directly allows you, the fan, to have the power to impact winning and losing more than at any other point in the history of college football. And that should be exciting, regardless of the fact that it's a crazy circus and negative and all that goes through. If you look at the bright side, as a fan, now you can have a direct impact. And you don't have to worry about coaches or anything. It's direct. It's easy. It's transactional. Just anyway. So that's probably that would be my message to the Gamecock Nation.
And again, I would highly encourage anyone listening, again, like you mentioned, JC, if they have any questions, reach out to you.
Sure. I'm glad to answer.
Rise. Yes, and you will answer those. Getting back to the portal, the stuff again, we're only, on our fourth day in this thing. So that's the crazy part. We got a long way to go. In regards to South Carolina's roster, I think, too, what folks have to keep in mind, and again, this happens across college football, not everyone is leaving voluntarily. Some guys they are clearing room on the roster, or at least Shane Beamer and his coaching staff are having very realistic conversations, right? End of year meetings of, hey, this is where you sit. This is probably what would best benefit you, et cetera. So just keep that in mind. But do you see more turnover on the roster via the portal? And JC, I'll just ask you point blank. Nick Emanwari is a name that folks keep bringing up. Ole Miss apparently was in town yesterday. They want Juice. Some folks are thinking they want E-Man. What's the latest on that?
They're not allowed to talk to Nick. He's not in the portal. So so there's that. But
maybe Lane Kiffin's just playing tricks on us all. I know you saw him post the golf cart. That was a fun day on social media yesterday. That was entertaining.
Yeah, and I'll remind, if you go back through his Twitter, he posted something. He was in Fayetteville in Arkansas.
Yeah, I think he just kind of toying with people. Maybe I don't know. But I don't know if you saw Taylor Edwards and a Ole Miss staffer kind of got into it, like going back and forth. They posted Juice's car. I don't know. It's hard to keep up with. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about Taylor. He's a little different. He'll get into a Twitter battle or two, and I think Carolina needs guys like that, like Taylor, who does a fantastic job. I would not want his job right now at all, ever, but yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. Nick came back this past year, right? Nick had some opportunity. However, some of that opportunity you heard about through the grapevine was not necessarily what the reality was, and I think he played really well down the stretch, and sort of knowing, what for lack of a better term, what his deal is and what it could be. I don't think he'll go anywhere. I think he likes to kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say keep the door open, but I mean he's the guy that's not going to delete his ex-girlfriend's numbers out of his phone. How about that? But it's okay because a lot of those guys I know they're my friends. They're happily married with kids, and that chick still texts you every now and then. Oh yeah, we're just friends, But let's just say that he's probably, he's a very friendly guy, and obviously great player and deserves what he gets, and I think he'll be fine here. But I agree with you. That's a name that just from my standpoint, I'm still watching it just because there's just too much chatter out there. But when you kind of check on it behind the scenes, that's not really a top 10 concern at this moment, just because of the deal. He's well taken care of. I'll say that.
And JC, you mentioned that Taylor Edwards is not someone you envy his job right now. I don't envy the job of Shane Beamer, who's on the road right now recruiting, and all this madness is taking place. And then people are wondering, well, where are the coaching staff changes as well? Let me first ask you about, again, there's guys coming to campus this weekend, next weekend, I think, transfer portal guys. Some of the top names you're hearing that maybe South Carolina's in good standing with. We've heard Jaden McGowan. We've heard Will Shepard. We've heard, obviously Rocket Sanders is coming to campus. We've heard about some FCS guys. We've heard some O linemen. And then on the coaching staff side, do you still expect changes? And would that be more like an early January thing? Would it be after some of the dust is settled in? I mean, it's crazy to think, JC, we've literally got signing day in 13 days. And I mean, it's weird how like that's completely taken a back seat almost to the transfer portal stuff, although it's really important. But just the latest on the portal front. On a positive, guys, South Carolina maybe in a good position to sign, and then the coaching staff stuff, just what you're hearing across the board.
Yeah, I'd probably start with Jaden McGowan from Vandy, in-state kid, supposed to come back. I mean, there's never any done deals, right? These days, especially. But I think Carolina's in good shape there. I think with Gerald Kilgore, Jelon's younger brother, who's actually a really good, if you watch his tape from Tennessee Tech, dude, that guy can play. He's a converted quarterback, but as we know from what we've seen at Carolina, sometimes converted quarterbacks do work out in the defensive backfield. So you like him. Will Shepard, it's gonna be tough. I keep hearing Georgia with him. I don't know that for sure. I do think if you get McGowan, depending on their relationship, you do have an in for a visit. He's from Louisiana. So I would always watch if LSU got involved. But he's man. He missed some time this past year, but he's one of the better receivers in the SEC. I watch him, and I don't know like what he does super. Some guys are fast guys, some guys are ball school guys, some guys are route runners. He just does everything good, fast enough, big enough, good enough hands, great route runner, productive. He's just productive, and that's the kind of guy in the portal you want. Probably a lot like Dominic Lovett last year from Missouri that ended up going to UGA. At running back, you mentioned Rocket Sanders. Finally, the rumors after all these years, he sets a visit to Carolina first and foremost. I'll remind everybody.
On that note, JC, I was just going to say, I literally heard last year, a couple hours before kickoff in Jacksonville at the Gator Bowl, hey, by the way, Rocket Sanders to South Carolina. I never said anything, obviously, but literally heard that last year. So kind of ironic.
I've been hearing that and Jimmy Smith is running backs coach for years. So, well, hey, here we go. Now he's visiting the Gamecocks. Carolina was number 2 for him. Bobby Bentley almost thought he had him, and then I think Justin Stepp was because he was a receiver out of Rockledge, Florida. And a guy like that, NIL wise, you're gonna, he's gonna have some expectations. He's also probably worth it, to be honest. the one thing I keep getting back to, that there's talk out there, it's just buzz, that maybe he wants to get closer to home because of his family. Rockledge is on the Space Coast, about a little southeast of Orlando. So what, you're talking about 7 hour drive versus maybe Florida State, which is up and over, maybe 4. And if you get Gainesville, obviously, because they're talking about ETN getting in the portal down there. So is proximity going to play a factor? Does he have enough time to wait on all these guys to offer, though? I mean, the visits are this week and next week, and that's it. You know, a lot of these guys are going to have to make decisions. So he would be a gigantic pickup. Dylan Smothers, the freshman from Oklahoma that was a 4-star guy out of Charlotte, I think is kind of on that list with the running back. And then Marcus Carroll, who's visiting Missouri this weekend. I just got a text about Rocket and NIL. How about that? Popped up on my thing. He's a baller. Marcus Carroll's a baller. If you remember him for Georgia State when he came up here as in 2022, he was good. This year he rushed for 1,374 yards. He rushed for 100 and something, I think, against LSU in Baton Rouge. A lot like Mario Anderson, but probably a little bit more elusive in the open field. And then Don Chaney Jr. is a guy they're going to have to really be comfortable with his injury situation because he's had a couple of bad ones. But you still don't close the door completely on him. Receiver, there's a kid from Purdue whose name I can't pronounce. It's a hyphenated Abdur, something like that. But he's one to keep an eye on. Also, Jaron Brown. He's Jaron or Jared Brown from Coastal. That dude's a baller. No problems at all if they get him. He's really good. Had a really good year at Coastal Carolina this year. And please don't take that as the whole board or everybody they're targeting. Those are just the names off the top of my head. And who's the tight end from Harvard? Neville, who's coming in this weekend. That's probably what they need at tight end. They need a guy that's kind of a dude that can block and catch and can kind of do it all out there, because you got Josh Simon coming back. And then Michael Smith is kind of that type of guy. He'll play. Elksness, Cox, McKeska, you still want to give them a little time, but if you can get an older dude to kind of shore that up and let those other guys come along slowly, I think that's a major positive for that position. So watch out for him as well. And I would love to break down the defensive line targets, but some of those guys aren't in the portal yet, so we don't talk about those guys yet.
JC, do we feel like South Carolina is going to pick up a quarterback or two to boost the depth in the room? I mean, not to start, obviously, but I mean, just to.
I do. I think you need to. It's in the works now. People ask me who. I don't know. I mean, there's talk about Grayson McCall from Coastal earlier, but it looks like he's going to go to NC State, as he probably should. The NC State backup, MJ Morris, who I don't think's in the portal right now, but if he did get in, that may be a guy. I'm going to use some examples of guys that I think they should target. I'm not saying they will, but AJ Swan and Ken Seals, the two kids that left Vandy, those would be the types of guys I'd kind of see. Look, they're got SEC starting experience. They've both had good moments. They both are talented. They were just at Vandy. And they're the types of guys that if you want to keep Luke Doty at this all-purpose role, to where he's working with the receivers most of the time, not with quarterback, you got a guy that started in the SEC that can come in, learn the offense, and if something, God forbid, happened to Sellers, he can get you out of a game or start some games for you, and you can still go in there and compete. You're not counting on a cross-trained Doty or a guy that's a true freshman in Dante Reno, which is neither one of those situations are ideal. So we'll see exactly who they end up with the quarterback, but I do think they'll get one.
There you have it. JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur inside the Gamecocks. JC, great stuff. I know that was a lot of information in one show, but very informative as always, and appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Keep up the great work, and try to take a deep breath or two here in the next couple of weeks, but I know you're working your tail off, so.
Yeah, got an annual Army-Navy game party on Saturday. I'm
Beautiful.
going to. The guy that throws it actually played on the 84 Navy team that beat Carolina. So wow. I catch all kinds of crap from Greg all the time. But he gives out like free Navy swag and stuff, free drinks, stuff like that. So we're gonna hit that up this weekend and enjoy that. We always do. But other than that, I'll be glued to my phone. So here we go.
JC, appreciate you taking the time, man. Looking forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, guys, that was JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur. Appreciate him taking the time. Really, really good stuff. Really informative there with everything happening with the portal and NIL. And there's a lot of questions of what's going on. JC, very, very helpful in that regard. And of course, as we all know, he is working his tail off right now when it comes to transfer portal and trying to sign deals and get guys back to South Carolina next year. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into a quick break on the other side. The official SEC schedule date, release date, I should say, is December the 13th. But of course, we all know leaks happen. 2 SEC football schedules for 2024 have been released, guys. I'll give my full thoughts and reactions to both Georgia and Ole Miss's rumored slates for the 24 season being leaked and being out there. Guys, all that and more on the side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home. Call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, December the 7th, 2023. Hope you're all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Want to say thank you yet again to our good friend JC Shurburtt of the Big Spur for taking the time to chat. I think one of the biggest takeaways of that conversation, as he mentioned, he fully expects Nick Emanwari to return to South Carolina next year. Nick Emanwari, a guy who has not signed any sort of deal, which again, guys, it does go back to the fact that fans can't feel confident or don't feel confident that a guy is returning to their school, a high caliber player, unless they sign a deal to come back. You know, it's just, that's where we are. That's where we are in college football and college athletics. But it's good to hear from JC Shurburtt that it does sound like indeed that he will be back. Guys, a really quick update, by the way. The schedule is going to be something that's going to be fluid this month. I was just taking a look over the break at our December schedule, and you can bank on no TDC on Thursday or Friday next week. We may also take off Wednesday, just depending on how the week shakes out and the schedule and what have you. When we come back that following week, the week of the 18th, of course, that Wednesday, the 20th, that is signing day, the 2024 signing day. We'll have a big show on that Wednesday. Tuesday, we'll do kind of a primer and preview it and break it all down. Maybe we'll actually save all that for Wednesday. But certainly the 20th, Wednesday, we'll talk a lot of recruiting. We'll have some special guests on, what have you. Going to be a lot of fun. In regards to the rest of that week, the 21st, the 22nd, I would say those days are up in the air. Obviously, Christmas Eve, the 24th is Sunday. Christmas Day, the 25th. Of course, there'll be no show. Will there be a show the 26th? I'm not sure. Again, it's fluid. So you guys have got to roll with the punches, be understanding. I know you will, obviously, but guys, I'll just say this, some really big things, monumental things coming at the end of this month. I'm not going to go any further than that, but certainly you guys will see it all across social media, and you'll be in the know, and you guys will be in the know. I'll just leave it at that. So anyways, guys, just stay tuned. Obviously, again, the schedule is fluid. We got a lot going on, Christmas holiday, traveling to see family, all that good stuff. And of course, spending time with your loved ones and all that. And, you know, taking the time to take a breath. You know, it never stops with the portal and recruiting and everything, but you'd like to think this is the time of year we can all kind of sit back, kick our feet up, rest by the fire, eat some good food, hang out with friends, family, what have you, and enjoy the Christmas season. So just be sure to stay locked in here, be locked in on social media, and we'll let you guys know what's going on. But either way, guys, we're going to continue with the 2023 season review, the SEC season review. That'll be running over the next 2 weeks because there's a lot of teams, obviously, to get into. So even if we don't do TDC, those will drop on YouTube. The YouTube content will continue to bleed out the eyeballs. Either way, guys, appreciate you all tuning in. We're going to keep the show moving. Some big SEC scheduling news as a pair of SEC schedules were officially leaked. Of course, guys, a quick reminder, next Wednesday, December the 13th, that is the official date in which all of the schedules will be released for the 2024 season. We already know opponents, but we'll actually find out when teams are playing who. So that's always, you know, you look forward to that because obviously that matters, right? When you play, who you play, where you play, all that good stuff. It goes a long way in putting together a championship caliber season. So we will find that out next Wednesday. But a pair of schedules, Georgia and Ole Miss, were both released over the last 24 hours or so. Some of it because you got alumni associations that are releasing dates. You got people just kind of sort of figuring out and crossing off their list. Okay, this is when the non-con is. This is when these matchups have been released. So we've got Georgia and Ole Miss right now. I would assume the rest, I should say, will come out next Wednesday. The Georgia schedule for 2024 looks like this. Dogs open up with Clemson in Atlanta, Georgia on the 31st of August to open up the season. Then they play Tennessee Tech, at Kentucky, bye week, at Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, at Texas, bye week. So 2 bye weeks. Everybody, I think, is going to get 2 bye weeks. Then Florida and Jacksonville, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, UMass, and then close it out with Georgia Tech. Now, the first thing that jumps out, guys, compared to the schedule this year, this is a gauntlet for the Dogs. Don't forget, we got a 12-team college football playoff. So, does Georgia have to go undefeated? Do they have to go 11-1? No, they do not. Also, for all the South Carolina folks, of course, you notice there is no Gamecocks. In case you missed that, South Carolina will not play Georgia, Tennessee, or Florida for the first time since 1991. This, of course, happening because of the expansion of the SEC, Oklahoma, and Texas joining the league. So a lot of stuff being thrown around, thrown for a loop, if you will. But the Dogs, again, opening up with Clemson and Atlanta. That's a tricky game, obviously. At Kentucky, your first road game. Who knows what the Cats will be? They may be taking on their former quarterback, Brock Vandagriff. Of course, he just committed to Kentucky. Then at Alabama. So your first 2 SEC games at Kentucky, at Bama. Then you got a dangerous Auburn team. Of course, it's in Athens, but still a dangerous Auburn team at Texas, which we see what Texas is doing in the college football playoff. What's Florida going to be? We'll see. You get them off the bye week also. At Ole Miss, right? Tricky game there with Lane Kiffin and company. The Tennessee game. So I think it's safe to say, guys, this Georgia schedule, and certainly nobody's going to feel bad for the Dogs because the schedule they got this year, and most folks would say it was a cupcake. It was super easy. This schedule's a gauntlet. I mean, this schedule is an absolute gauntlet, guys. You're going to get potentially the national champion is going to be on your schedule. And at worst, 2 of the 4 in the college football playoff this year are on that schedule. Of course, guys, all attention will be on that game at Alabama, but that game at Texas is going to be an absolute classic as well. A really good schedule, a fun schedule, entertaining schedule. Of course, that Georgia-Clemson game in Atlanta is going to be a lot of fun, but this is a gauntlet of a schedule. Georgia gets this through this thing 11-1 or 12-0. I mean, my goodness. But again, you only probably need to win double-digit games, and that's a schedule where, hey, Georgia could go 10-2, lose to Texas and Bama. They're easily still in that 12-team playoff, I think. Also, guys, of course, the Ole Miss schedule has been released. This is, per the Ole Miss Alumni Association because they leaked a bunch of dates. So this is what is thought to be Ole Miss's schedule. They open up with the Furman Paladins on August 31st. Then they have Middle Tennessee State, at Wake Forest, Georgia Southern. A very, very easy first 4 games. Then you have Kentucky at home to round out the month of September. So, I mean, a good chance that Ole Miss starts this next season 5-0. Then the road trip to kick off the month of October to Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. That game rumored to be scheduled on October the 5th. Then you've got at LSU, so at South Carolina, at LSU back-to-back. Bye week then for Ole Miss. They then get the Oklahoma Sooners on October the 26th. Then at Arkansas, Georgia at home, bye week at Florida, and Mississippi State. Again, guys, I think everybody in the SEC is going to get 2 bye weeks this year. I don't know if it's just one of those weird years where because of when the season's starting, but everybody I think is going to get 2 bye weeks. So you get 2 bye weeks now this year, or next year, in 2024. Obviously those road trips, the at LSU is tough. I mean, at South Carolina, at LSU back-to-back is tough. We know Williams-Brice Stadium, one of the most raucous environments in all of college football. And, of course, LSU right there plays second fiddle to no one. So that stretch of South Carolina, LSU on the road, Oklahoma at home, at Arkansas. You'd imagine an improved Arkansas team, and then Georgia. Then you got to go to the Swamp. So it gets really, really tough for Ole Miss late in the season. But this really reminds me of a traditional Kentucky schedule where the first month or so of the season is going to allow them an opportunity to get their feet under them, to build some momentum. Of course, Jackson Dart, we know, unless something changes, of course, which it can in college football, but Jackson Dart is supposed to be back next season. So you'd imagine Ole Miss will be looked upon highly to have yet another big-time campaign, 10 wins this season. I think Ole Miss is probably looked at as a team that potentially could be in the college football playoff next year with it going to 12 teams. So, a manageable slate for the most part. Again, things get really tricky later into the season. The road trips at South Carolina, at LSU, at Arkansas, at Florida. I think for 3 of those 4, you just kind of wonder what they're going to be next year, right? Three of those 4 were not very good this year, and then LSU replacing Jaden Daniels and a lot of their big-time production as well. And then that Oklahoma game in Oxford to close out the month of October. So a manageable schedule, get a schedule that allows you to get your feet under you early, but certainly the challenges of SEC play hit you late. And then, guys, like I mentioned, going back to Georgia, the gauntlet that awaits the Dogs in 2024. And again, I don't know there's many SEC folks going to shed a tear after the schedule they had this year in the regular season, but it's going to be interesting. I think the way we look at schedules, too, is probably going to change because, again, 12-team playoff. You don't have to go undefeated. There's some room for error there, right? So even for a Georgia that's got Bama and Texas both on the road, there's room for error, but not a ton. But not a ton when you're the Georgia Bulldogs. So those are the schedules of Georgia and Ole Miss for the 2024 season. Full SEC schedule release set for next Wednesday, December 13th. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll take your questions, your comments, your voicemails, and more. I want to hear from you in our daily mailbag segment. All that and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home. Call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, December the 7th, 2023. That being said, guys, we've entered our daily mailbag segment of the show, taking your questions, your comments, and your voicemails, 843-790-3377. Guys, the news that just came out in the last, 15 minutes or so, Debo Williams, Gamecocks linebacker, will return for the 2024 season, one of the top tacklers in 2023, a big-time contributor for South Carolina. He is back. Also, guys, portal news, in case you missed it, Trevor Etienne, or excuse me, is it Travis Etienne? Travis Etienne. Yeah, I get the Etiennes confused. Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne is officially in the portal, so things only get tougher for Billy Napier. And guys, I've been reading some of the feedback, some of the reaction from Florida folks, and they are in a bit of disarray. There is no question they are in a bit of disarray for sure. Anyways, guys, the portal giveth, the portal taketh. So big to get Debo Williams back. That being said, guys, like I mentioned, I want to hear from you. Final 20 minutes or so of the show. We will not jump into any more breaks. This is your time. We're wide open. 843-790-3377. You can call and leave us a voicemail. You can be part of the show. Would love to have you be a part of what we're doing here. We go to the text line. Texter says, is it an NIL thing that we wouldn't go after big arm pocket passing quarterbacks like Will Rogers from Mississippi State, Riley Leonard from Duke, Will Howard out of Kansas State, even Brock Vandagriff, who left Georgia for Kentucky? Wonder if we ever contacted him. Is the answer really potentially bringing KJ Jefferson in from Arkansas? This comes from Brent. Brent, I appreciate the question. Appreciate the text. I would say the reason you're not seeing South Carolina go after those guys is they really, fully, truly believe in Lenoris Sellers. I think they are locked in on Lenoris Sellers. If they did not, I think you'd see South Carolina be active in the transfer portal for a quarterback. And I tell you what, they've got to have a lot of belief in the kid, because Shane Beamer's job, his job standing, his job status, whether you want to admit it or not, it's on the line next year. It is. I think Shane Beamer's seat is warm going into next season. So they feel confident. They believe in Lenoris Sellers. And, I think that's why you have not seen South Carolina. That's why you have not seen South Carolina go out and attack the portal for a quarterback. Texter says, this is Jacob from Piedmont. Appreciate you, Jacob from Piedmont. He says, what we learned is that P.J. Hall can flop, and over the back isn't a foul when Clemson does it. Yeah, tough loss last night. I know Gamecock fans, that was a tough one. We talked about it a lot late last night in the post-game call-in show. I think there's a lot to be encouraged by, guys. I think South Carolina, we'll let it play out. But, I think when you think about what the preseason expectations were for this basketball team, even after last night's loss, it feels like this team is ahead of where most of us expected them to be. I think there's a lot of good signs. I think the transfer portal has actually really helped South Carolina basketball tremendously when you look at the guys they have on their roster. So, I thought that was a good game between two good teams. Got to give Clemson a lot of credit, but I think South Carolina, to go on the road, go toe-to-toe with a top 25 team like that, if South Carolina is able to learn from that, take it over the weekend to East Carolina, go beat them, I think you still can go 12-1 or so in non-conference and set yourself up really, really well for SEC play. And making the NIT, I think, is still within the realm of possibility. And we all agreed in the preseason that making the NIT would be a success for Lamont Paris in year 2 of his tenure. And certainly you can still achieve that. Texter says, I encourage Gamecock fans to continue giving the NIL. While we may never be as rich as some other schools, we have the power to make ourselves contenders, even if a good player leaves after 1 year. It's not a waste because it shows that the guys around the country you can shine here, and with the right combination of talent in any given year, we can achieve great things. Yeah, I mean, listen, I would say this. It's like J.C. Shurburtt said. I mean, what other choice do you have? You know what I mean? Either get on board and give to NIL or just say nothing and do what you want with your money. And that's where I fall, guys. Like I obviously don't. I'm gonna give you guys my honest take and honest opinions or what have you. But certainly I don't come on here to slander NIL or talk about how dumb it is or how foolish you are if you donate. Like, do with your money what you want, right? Like, I think it's really, really cool that fans can be involved and give back and feel as if they're making a difference and truly do make a difference. That being said, I think that it's a very flawed system to ask fans who already invest in tickets and travel and everything, Gamecock Club, right, or whatever booster club it is for your school. I think it's very, very unfair to ask fans for more and to put it on fans that, well, the reason we aren't competing at a higher level is because of you, because your pockets aren't deep enough. I think that's wrong. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's a sustainable method of operation. But, fans, as J.C. Shurburtt was saying, they have the ability to impact the game now. And so, it's a great thing, but, there's some negatives as well. Sorry, the dogs are in here. I think one of them's dreaming. He's like barking, like growling in their sleep. I was like, what in the world is that sound? Anyways, guys, 843-790-3377. You can call that number. You can text that number. You can leave us a voicemail, and we'll get to your questions in the chat as well. Here we go. John Edward. Someone was saying in the chat on JC's show that Mario Anderson wasn't leaving. LOL, what's going on? No idea, John Edward. It changes literally by the second. So, Chuck Burkett, appreciate you being in here. Some Juice Wells comments. Y'all are not very thrilled. Ryan Miller says, let them all leave if they want to. I will say this, Ryan, to your point, to that comment, let them all leave if they want to. I know there's fan favorites out there. I understand it, right? Like, I get there's fan favorites out there. But I can't help but feel like, why would anyone shed a tear over any player from a 5-7 team leaving? I mean, the team was not good, right? South Carolina stunk in 2023. And this wasn't a season where you're like, man, if just this happened and this happened, Carolina could have won 8-4. No, this was a season where that was a 5-7 team from start to finish, and Carolina's probably lucky they didn't go 3-9. So, I mean, if there's a quote-unquote mass exodus of players from a 5-7 football team, good. I mean, honestly, like, are you telling me you can't go out in the portal and get guys that are of equal ability, if not better than, from those 5-7 football players? I mean, again, there are fan favorites. I get it. There's fan favorites that you hate to see go, but it's like you lose your running back, you lose one of your top receivers, you lose a guy on defense. It's like, okay, you were part of a 5-7 football team. Like, are you that big of a loss? Are you as big of a loss as you think you are? I know social media and everything and highlight culture has created this environment where everybody's got insane egos, but like, if you were a member, especially a contributing member to a 5-7 record, you are replaceable. Like, you are very replaceable. So I know it makes folks uncomfortable still to see roster turnover to the level we've seen with South Carolina, but I mean, happy trails, hit the road. You're more than replaceable. This goes for South Carolina. This goes for Arkansas. This goes for really any team that struggled. It's like, go ahead. All you did was help contribute to a losing season. Congratulations. You're replaceable. It's going to be a talking point. I understand, like a Mario Anderson became a fan favorite. Heck, I saw somebody comment on social media, I got my son or daughter their jersey for Christmas, and now you've hit the portal. Like, that sucks for sure. But I mean, if Mario Anderson wants to leave, guys, congratulations. He was the starting running back for a 5-7 football team. He was the starting running back for one of the worst rushing offenses in the conference. Like, does it really matter? I mean, are you telling me that Dontavius Braswell couldn't do what Mario Anderson did? Are you telling me there aren't other players in the portal that couldn't match the production of a Division II running back? All due respect. I mean, I'm just saying, man, like, are we really going to lose sleep over it? I'm just saying, bro. I'm just saying. Madison Duncan, how about the Lady Gamecocks? Big W. Madison, can I ask you an honest question? And you don't have the answer, but like, why do they even play those games? What was it? Morgan State, I think, or something like that. Why do those games get scheduled? Like, what good? What good does it do to play Morgan State or whatever it was? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, man. It just, I mean, Carolina was favored by like 60 points. I don't know why. I don't know man. I don't know why I don't know why they play those games. I mean, it's fun to see Carolina beat up on people, but I mean, Jacob E. says South Carolina just doesn't have the alumni love and support that the other schools have. Beamer is just going to have to do more with less until the donations pour in. Well, guys, I don't know, man. It's early in the portal. I mean, South Carolina is obviously going to have to scramble and work to build a roster, right? They're not going to go out there and play with 50. So they're going to have to build a roster, but still very early in this thing. Very, very early. Let's see. Chuck Burkett with players in for the weekend. I asked Santa to give me a rocket, a little Christmas carol, and some Cheney for the buckets. A Mario as an ornament topper, and oh, what a Christmas it will be. Bird Toffley, I don't blame Mario. He's talented. He wants to go to a school with an O-line. Ethan K, he's a decent back. Can't see him starting from any other programs other than like a Vandy or Boston College type. Brian Miller says, let Mario leave. He wouldn't be where he is without South Carolina giving him clout. He came from Newberry. All we have done is praise Mario, and this is how he is going to do us in return. Just let him be, LOL. Let's see. Ethan K, bottom line is all players are getting greedy, and we can't afford to keep them all. I mean, that's a great way, Ethan, to to look at it, honestly. Honestly, that's a great way to look at it. Let's see. Chris, it's a business as much as it is a sport. For sure. It is absolutely a business. Billy Cotton, there's definitely a coaching culture problem now. There's no reason to lose this many players every year. Apparently, Gamecock players are not finding joy. Billy Cotton also said, who cares about Arkansas? Going back to our conversation, top of the show. Billy, man, I've been talking SEC ball all season, really since the summer, Billy, and I'm just going to tell you this without going into any more detail because the details will come out soon. There's going to be a lot more where that came from. I want to just leave it at that. So, and I think you guys have embraced it. I actually think that, you guys have really embraced the SEC chatter. And I think that, folks, South Carolina may be your team. It may be our team, but like South Carolina is also in the SEC. And I think it's good to know what's going on in other schools and embrace the conference as a whole in regards to talking ball, right? That's what we're doing. We're just talking ball. So anyways, those combos are going to continue. LSU tomorrow, Ole Miss Monday, Vandy Tuesday, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, no, Nicky Minwari, guys, not in the portal. I saw some comments, not in the portal. Absolutely not. Jeff Gullidge, For everyone that gets upset about players leaving, I wonder if you do that at your job. If Frank in accounting leaves, do you get that upset if they don't want to be here? I mean, I get what you're saying, Jeff. It's a little bit different, but I get what you're saying. So, John Edward, wouldn't be surprised if we get transfers this weekend. Thoughts? Yeah, I think you could probably expect South Carolina to land a player or two. I mean, JC pointed out that I mean, guys don't have that long. They got a couple weeks, and that's about it. So I would not be surprised if South Carolina landed a couple of transfer portal commitments this weekend. Coach Ford, we've only lost Juice to money. What about the others? Why are they leaving? That is where to be concerned. I mean, Coach Ford, I think Mario Anderson's decision does come down to some money. I think it does. And then Coach Ford, the other guys, admittedly, I mean, they haven't played. Coach Ford, you're going to lose guys in the portal. I mean, to be fair, listen, I get being critical. I'm as critical as any, but let's be fair too in the criticism, right? I mean, guys are going to, a lot of these guys that are leaving Coach Ford, they played in 4 games in 2 years, 8 games in 3 years. I mean, they're not playing. They're not contributors. So, I mean, that's going to happen. That's going to happen, whether it's by they wanted to leave or get this, some of them are told to leave. Chuck Burkett. By games, I guess it gives them an opportunity to work on schemes in a game environment. I don't know, Chris. Payday for smaller schools. Good question, though. Mark Livingston. I get that not shedding a tear of a player leaving from a 5-7 team. We're also going after players from Arkansas and Vandy. So what is the difference? Just an honest question, because you can still have good players that are just on a bad team collectively. Mark, listen, good point. Good point. I mean, listen, man, admittedly, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it and tell you that everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows or what have you. I mean, South Carolina, Juice Wells leaving sucked. If Mario Anderson leaves, that's not ideal. Mitch Jeter leaving is more so weird. I mean, you can replace a kicker, I think. But the rest of these guys, they have not played a ton, right? To your point, Mark, we're talking about South Carolina, FCS guys visiting, a guy from Vanderbilt visiting and potentially signing. And I mean, it's, I prefer to, I prefer to evaluate the portal cycle, Mark, when it's over. But I will tell you this, Mark, if you've lost Juice Wells. If you lose Mario Anderson, even if it's just those two guys, right? And the goal is to pick up and replace more than what you lose, right? That's what South Carolina did not do last year. That's what in the first portal cycle, they did that. They got Spencer Rattler. They got Juice Wells. They won the portal. It was no debate. They won the portal massively. Last year, they lost the portal. People didn't want to hear that, but they lost the portal. Losing Jaheim Bell, Gilbert Edmond, Jordan Birch, Marshawn Lloyd. They lost the portal. The guys, they didn't fill those voids, right? The offensive linemen they picked up, not very good. They were FCS level scrubs, like I said, after the North Carolina game. If it's a similar portal cycle, guys, and you're going to know, do you pick up difference makers or do you not, right? I think a guy like a Jaden McGowan from Vandy, that's a ball player. That'd be a positive addition, no doubt. If you got Will Shepherd, that'd be another one. If you got Rocket Sanders, I think it's very obvious, Mark, to your point. It's very obvious, right? But the goal is to gain more than you lose in the portal, because that's what it comes down to, right? You heard John Nabors of Locked On Razorbacks talk about it. They don't even care about recruiting. Guys, that's the crazy part, is recruiting's taken such a back seat. We got signing day in 13 days. But when your coach has to win now, right? When your coach has to win now, for example, what's going down in Gainesville? Bro, these recruiting classes, they've never meant less, especially early in a coach's tenure. Recruiting the high school ranks has never meant less. It's never meant less because it's win now. You don't have 2-3 years to develop the guys. Because guess what? If you don't win now, you may not see that talent. You may not be the beneficiary of that talent. So it's about gaining more than you lose in the portal. We'll see what takes place. I do agree with you, Mark. Rocket Sanders comes from a 5-7 football team. We know he's a good ball player, though. KJ Jefferson's going to be highly sought after. Quarterback on a 5-7 team, still a pretty good ball player. I mean, the same can be said for Juice Wells and for Mario Anderson, right? Both guys were, Juice Wells' numbers speak for himself, and then Mario Anderson, he was productive, especially when you look at the offensive line. Shane Beamer's got to go out and replace those guys. And again, they're facing this at Florida. They're facing this at Arkansas. They're facing this at many schools. So, I think it's going to be very clear whether South Carolina won or lost in the portal again. And, I mean, guys, Shane Beamer's future at South Carolina, I think it relies heavily on two things right now. Three things. One of the very obvious is winning next year. Getting to 7 wins or so, turning it around, right? Not missing a bowl game. Winning is obvious. But the off-field, Shane Beamer's job is hinging on two things. Finding success in the portal and making the correct staff changes. That's what his job is hinging on right now. Can he do those two things? I mean, this offseason, guys, is going to tell us a lot. I got to be honest. If they struggle in the portal again, and if the necessary staff changes for whatever reason aren't made, I know it all comes down to what you do on the field, but that will not be a good sign in my mind. It just will not be a good sign. I'm not saying fire Shane Beamer today, but what I'm saying is it's what you do in the offseason to build your football team that sets up the season that you're going to have. And I mean, because we've talked a lot, right? Like, does he get till 2025? Does he get till 2026? Guys, you have another bad portal cycle and you go 5-7 or worse again, I think all bets are off. I really do. I think all bets are off. I don't think Beamer will get fired. I don't. I don't think Beamer will get fired, but there's going to be a lot of heat. Travis Allen, we'll take a couple more questions. Travis Allen, do collectives decide if we can afford an athlete? Travis, when let me just say this, Travis. When you're on a Zoom call with a prospect, or you're on the phone, or you're in-house, a lot of those prospects, their first question is, how much? How much can I get? A lot of them. So, Travis, you tell me. Yeah, I think price point plays a large factor. So, Bill says, Chris, the bar isn't that high, 5-7. The bar was pretty high from the previous year, 8-4 with great wins over top 5 teams and ending 2 streaks in Clemson. Bill, the hype won't be the same going into 24, but the expectations will absolutely be there. It's you go 5-7 or worse, going to be tough. Madison, to answer your question, you have to play someone. South Carolina has a deep bench with the Lady Gamecocks, the number 1 squad, moving ahead to number 11, Utah Sunday at 2:30. It will be fun. Indeed. Let's see. Austin Gregory, Juice using our facilities to trash us is so strange. Really makes me question why he even has access to said facilities. Unacceptable. Yeah, it's crazy, honestly. It is crazy indeed. Guys, we've hit 2 o'clock. Appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live, when we drop new video content as well. Also, guys, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. You can find us there at The Spurs Up Show. And stay tuned to all of our content bleeding out of the eyeballs. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.